and welcome back to the Belonging at Work Summit. We are now going to chat with the incredible Di Tiger. So for those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of connecting with Di, she is the founder of Tiger Lily Healing, a heart-centered, holistic, restorative business committed to helping you achieve deep, meaningful life transformations. Born from the devastating deaths of her father, sister, partner, and two close friends to cancer, all within a 2-year time span, Di has dedicated herself to helping others rediscover and maintain their health and well-being by using the same integrated, holistic practices and techniques that helped her and her loved ones heal after such debilitating loss. As you all know, today's focus is squarely on self-care strategies. How do we keep moving forward with this work when it gets hard? And for those of us leading or doing this work, we all know far too well that it does get very hard. So fear not, because this is all about empowerment. And as Di will guide us through some of the self-care basics that will allow us to keep our bodies, minds, and spirits strong to continue moving forward with this critical work. So together, we're going to discuss the important topic of self-care strategies for diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders. And I can't stress enough how important this topic truly is for so many of us involved with creating change at work. So oftentimes we are the few and blue or the only and lonelies pushing against the grain to prepare our organizations for the future of work. In this conversation, we're going to unpack all that it takes, or at least some of it, to get us started, to continue to have the tenacity, grit, and perseverance to stay true to our why, or simply why we choose to do this work. So Di, welcome. I am super, super grateful for your time and expertise. Are you ready to do the thing?
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'm thrilled.
Excellent.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So Di, one of your many professional superpowers as a healer is that you've had some direct experience working in corporate America and actually quite a bit of experience for most of your career. So can you share with us a little bit more about those experiences and the role general self-care strategies play, beyond simply taking a bath or going out for a walk, that could help us show up more authentically at work for everyone participating in this in the summit?
Yeah, and I have about 40 years of corporate experience. So, and I've had a variety of roles over those years. And frankly, a good majority of that time has been while I wasn't actually leading a diversity and inclusion team, I was supporting those teams as head of learning and development. In some organizations, head of leadership development, and others. My team was closely aligned with that work. And frankly, I know those stresses all too well. I spent many years living that same life, trying to push an agenda forward, trying to change culture, trying to change an environment. And I know those stresses because I felt them, as well as worked with individuals that was feeling them as well. I myself suffered some medical issues early in my career in my 30s because I wasn't practicing the self-care that I needed. And so I had to learn the hard way, like many people do, that I had to put that priority into place. But the struggle was always with the discipline. Right? So even though I knew on some cognitive level that simple practices such as breathing techniques and stepping back and pausing throughout the day to take care of myself, to just take a breath and allow myself that space to clear my mind and clear the energy that was collecting up in my body, that was causing my brain to fire, that was causing me to feel stressed. I understood what needed to be done, but it was the discipline that really needed to come through. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, even in coaching with other folks who are in that space today, that seems to be the number one obstacle, is how do we just have the discipline to pause?
Yes. Yeah. I really, really appreciate what you're saying about struggling to maintain this discipline, right? It's the discipline of showing up every day. If you do something in the morning, to kind of check in with where you're at, to continue to do that every morning and not just kind of once in a blue moon when you think about it. And then this kind of, I think that something that pairs with the discipline is also making the time to do the things that are good for you, for your own development, for your own body, in terms of health for body, mind and spirit. So I wanted to go to something that was mentioned in your bio, which is the debilitating loss that you experienced from, frankly, losing so many of your loved ones to cancer in such a short time period. So as you were healing from such trauma, I'm imagining this was still when you were working in a corporate environment. How did your journey to discovering self-care positively impact how you showed up at work? So I guess like one is, how did you discover these kind of self-care strategies for yourself? And then what changes did you notice in kind of doing the work that you do every day? Did you notice changes, I guess?
Yeah. Oh boy, did I ever. The funny thing is I dabbled in all of these things for years, for decades. I discovered yoga as a child. I'm really going to date myself now, but I was watching PBS when I was about 8 years old, and there was this really cool lady with long hair who was doing these funky practices, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and I started practicing with her. I didn't even know what yoga was at the time, right?
Yeah.
And so for decades leading up to 2010, which is the year kind of everything fell apart for me, these were things that I did periodically, right? And I would, like everyone else, right? I didn't have the discipline. I would do it when I was really stressed, or I would do it when I was on vacation and I would feel really good. And then it kind of would all fall apart. And, I'd get busy and I'd be working 12 and 14 hours a day. And my self-care fell to the wayside.
Yeah.
And it was, I would say it really started in 2008 when my sister and my partner became ill. And I started to beg both of them to start integrating Reiki and breathing techniques and different things to help with their healing, to help with their stress levels. And I recognized that running a full-time job, having two people that I love so dearly, battling this devastating illness, I was falling apart. I had become quite thin and just full of aches and pains. And I was, trying to keep everything going and keep everything together and keep positive, being a caretaker, being an executive, right? All those things were happening. And for myself, it was really in 2010. So my partner died in January, my sister died in July. And in between, there were a lot of other things that happened. I lost my home and a bunch of other things happened. And the simplicity of going to yoga and practicing yoga in my home every day, taking a yoga class once a week, changed my life because I started to breathe again. After they passed away, and the devastation and the grief of losing these two people that meant the world to me, having just lost two friends, finding out my father was stage 4 cancer, the same cancer my sister had, all within a short window of time. Yeah. I can't emphasize enough. I don't know how I would have survived had I not had a wonderful grief counselor, because that was necessary, right, to deal with the emotional element. Yeah. But even with dealing with the emotional element, just not sleeping, not just feeling lost in the world, nothing had meaning. And by bringing myself back into these practices, for me, it was yoga first. And then the yoga brought me back into just learning how to breathe. And that sounds so silly, but when we're stressed, we don't breathe fully. We breathe very shallow. Yeah. And then that causes all kinds of chemical adjustments in the body and all sorts of neurological shifts. But by teaching myself and going to meditation practices and things just to educate myself, I learned how to breathe again. And then slowly but surely I could release the emotion. I could release the grief. Now I'm 10 years past all of these deaths, but I have to be honest, right? The grief never leaves. It becomes part of fabric of who you are. Yeah. But the pain and the emotion was able to shift out. And I had the tools then to get balance back into my life. And then the next big shift was I started asking myself, what were my priorities? What was important to me? All of a sudden, the 14-hour days and the struggle to change the culture in the corporate environment shifted. Not that I no longer believe in those things, but my mission shifted to helping other people.
Yeah.
Because I noticed even in my professional life, then as I was coming into healing, as a primary role of leadership development, right, and head of executive development, I was coaching executives every day. And I started to recognize that they were as unhealthy as I was, even though they hadn't necessarily gone through the levels of grief that I had gone through. And so I started coaching people on simple techniques like breathing, like taking pauses throughout the day. As you said, you know, the discipline of saying every morning before I jump in the shower, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to listen to some healing music while I'm having my cup of tea. 10 minutes. And the difference that 10 minutes would make in their lives, that became more meaningful to me than anything I was doing in the corporate space. So effectively, it changed my life, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, and professionally.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's a lot. I mean, and it's super powerful. I mean, personal stories are so meaningful of just understanding why we do what we do. And I really appreciate everything that you said. And in talking about priorities for yourself after kind of the loss that you experienced in such a short amount of time, kind of going through the grief process, getting the support that you needed at the time. And then as you kind of made space to breathe, really kind of taking stock again of, you know, who you are in the world now that so much has changed, including what your priorities are in your life mission. Right. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, kind of talking about your role in learning and development in corporate of, you know, a lot of what you're doing is kind of healing systems, right? You know, in that role of kind of thinking the big picture and then kind of, you know, almost kind of scaling that back of like, okay, in this work, what still resonates for me? And it's just that healing piece that's kind of, at least what I see from you of that trend line that still runs true. And as you are doing, you know, the work that you do every day in your practice of coaching other executives and other people on how to make space for themselves to heal, I'm curious for those folks that are still in the workplace, you know, what are some of those common stressors that you see that manifest primarily from work environments?
I think the most common stressor that I see is that, to put it in simplest terms, those of us that are in like a learning and development space or in a diversity and inclusion space, we tend to be mission-driven people. And we see the power of creating this environment within the corporate culture of inclusion, of having a space where people can perform and feel their best, you know, and bring their best into the corporate space and bring that balance. And the nature of corporate, and nothing against corporate, 40 years of great success, right? Nothing against corporate, but the nature of business is to keep pressing forward. There are a lot of cogs we're trying to move, a lot of minds we're trying to shift. So it's kind of like trying to turn a battleship, you know, with a fork, right? So that desire, that drive gets challenged by all the things that we have to, I don't want to use the term politics, it's just all of the functions that we have to influence. So it feels like we're moving so slowly, and something that feels very basic and fundamental can take years to even become accepted, let alone to actually shift the culture. So it's exhausting. And it feels like we're moving in inches when you can see that, boy, just one big leap and we could make huge progress. And so what I see day in and day out, in the coaching that I do and in the healing work that I do, and even in my own experience in corporate, is that the fatigue of that process just becomes overwhelming. And we think it's the company. I've watched so many people who will work for an organization for a number of years and then say, well, it's them, I'm going to move to the next organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move to the next organization. It feels really good for about the first year. And then we hit the same challenges. And then the fatigue kicks in again and we change companies. Or we leave the career altogether. We say, well, it's just too exhausting. I'm going to go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to take the long road and the long view to say, this will take a long time. And we have to look at those systems and those processes we can put into place for ourselves to stay healthy and to maintain the endurance. It's like, we're marathoners, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than sprinters. And so what I've seen for decades is that we know cognitively that it's a marathon, but we're trying to sprint.
Yeah.
And it's keeping that beautiful mindset of saying, we're gonna move in inches, but we're gonna love those inches, and we're gonna recognize those inches. We're gonna reward ourselves for those inches. We're gonna care for ourselves so that we can really run that marathon.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying about this recognition that many of us that identify as change agents and whatever our roles are, that we are very mission oriented. We're very passionate, and I've asked this question of other guests on this day in particular. One of the biggest contributors that I see, as a stressor is this idea of burnout. So it builds off of the concept that you shared of fatigue and coming primarily from personal investment that so many of us have with our employers of quote unquote getting it right. And like you said, making the real long-term commitments to transforming an organization's culture, which is absolutely a marathon. And oftentimes leaders at the top are looking for quick wins, like what's the big thing that you're going to accomplish this year that's part of my legacy, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess on this topic, what advice would you or do you offer the folks that you work with doing this work around managing how to leverage our passion, but not take everything so personally on a personal level? Because I do think that personal investment, the emotional labor that we put in, often if things are not moving fast enough for us, kind of contribute to that fatigue and that burnout. So I'm just curious, when folks come to you and they're sharing, their whole selves, like their whole life, but then on the aspects of work, if they're doing some kind of change management, I guess, how do you encourage them to kind of step back and see the bigger picture and also kind of to celebrate those successes? Because like you said, in a corporate environment, you're always pushing on to the next campaign. You got that done. Good job. Now move forward. But how do you really step back and celebrate those successes, I guess?
Yeah, I think the big thing, and now I'm gonna sound really linear, but one of the big success factors is to set those shorter milestones,
Mm-hmm.
pause, and say we've hit that one, right? Yes, we have the long view. I'm going to go back to a lesson that I actually was just reminded of recently, in my own life. I think the big lesson is, if we keep looking to the big end goal, we lose the little victories, right? So we have to start looking one step at a time. So as I'm coaching or supporting someone from a healing perspective, we look at, so what's the next step? And when you make that step, pause, look around you, look at the difference that one step has made. Because what happens, and we're all guilty of it, myself included, is we look all the way at the end and say, well, we haven't achieved that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we feel as though we failed, or we feel as though it's so far away we're never going to achieve it. And we burn ourselves out just by looking out there.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's milestones from a project planning perspective, or it's from just a organizational achievement, maybe it's an event, maybe it's some success within your ERGs, or some success within your, an ERG I think is pretty common, but an employee resource group, for example.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right? Were we successful in launching something that 2-3 years ago we wouldn't have been successful in launching?
Mm-hmm.
and the tendency is to say, yes, but we could have done so much more, and stop the but. Stop the but, right? Just, yes, we took this step. And last year, 2 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Stop, reward yourself, and reward yourself in a beautiful and healthy way, right? Whether it's just stepping back and taking a deep breath and say, that was awesome, or gather some folks around, and have a physical celebration, or go take a great yoga class or go for a walk or something, but pause and recognize that moment. And let yourself breathe that moment in. I'm going to keep coming back to the word breath, because breath is critical. All right. So if you breathe that moment in and say, wow, that was awesome and amazing, and we achieved it. I mean, I worked for 20 years for an art organization that was wonderful. And they were big on we can always be better, which is wonderful, right? We can always be better. But when we had success, we forgot to just stop and say, that was great.
Yeah.
And give ourselves 24 hours before we start moving on to the next thing. We would literally be at the end of an amazing event or an amazing launch and would sit there and say, okay, when do we start the next one?
Yes.
Right. And that was a culture, right?
Yep.
And so the discipline of having at least one person stop everyone and say, wait, look at how amazing this was. Let's just breathe that in. We'll talk about that other thing, that next thing, tomorrow.
Yeah. In your career in corporate, you've talked about this kind of dominant culture of all right, we did that, moving forward, and it's never taking the breath, never stopping to celebrate for extended periods of time. So that's kind of the norm, right? Have you, during your time working for other folks, did you ever see the exception? Did you ever see an example where a big thing was accomplished, a change was made that actually helped more people feel a sense of belonging in the workplace, and there was a timeout, there was an actual kind of like company-wide celebration to honor that? I'm curious if any examples come to mind, or if this is just like the phenomenon that doesn't happen, period.
I have experienced it. And it, admittedly all too rarely, but I have experienced it. I think the best example is actually an example of an individual leader who made us stop. So I was part of a large group. We had a very large initiative, many, many hands. It was definitely a journey. I'll leave it at that, right? Yeah. We worked hard as a team, and there were lots of hands.
Yeah.
And we were in that mode of, okay, we finished, now on to the next thing. And this leader pulled us all in a room, and some of us were virtual, but he pulled us all into a room and literally said that to us and said, stop. Just take a moment and think about the impact we've just had. Think about the difference we've just made. Those two questions, everyone in the room, and at the risk of an eye roll, about half the group was in tears because we had done so much work. And this particular leader just saying to us, stop and think about the impact we've had. Stop and think about how there's at least one person who's going to think differently, who's going to act differently tomorrow as a result of what we've accomplished.
Absolutely.
And that was the point, again, at the risk of the eye roll, because I know emotion isn't always comfortable, but at least half the group was sitting there teary-eyed because we hadn't stopped and paused and thought about that impact. We were all high five, we finished, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
That leader was a great role model for me, because then as a leader, I strove to model that.
Yeah. A lot of what you're sharing reminds me of when I was working in Washington, D.C., doing a lot of advocacy for LGBT communities. We were on Capitol Hill every day, pushing legislators to consider laws or policies that could help, deliver some equity and injustice and justice to LGBT communities. And we got some feedback from a staffer on the Hill one time of really saying, hey, slow down. We just accomplished X, Y, and Z. We would really love for advocates to kind of celebrate with us and to say thank you, right? Basic kind of business courtesy. And I think sometimes when we are so motivated with trying to stand up and support folks that are from marginalized communities, especially in the workplace, there's a sense of urgency and this idea that we always have to go and give. And I think that's where some of this burnout starts to manifest. And so you had mentioned a couple of times like different healing modalities that you employ when working with your clients. So for those folks that you work with who are change agents in the workplace, they engage in some kind of social justice work. I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you encourage these types of folks to build in self-care activities when they're in the workplace in particular, but in their life in general, and what might be some of those techniques? You had mentioned breathing, so we can build off of that. But I'm curious, like some concrete things that could be helpful for folks viewing our conversation right now.
Yeah, there are a couple of really simple things that I encourage busy people. So whether it's corporate professional, nurses, teachers, right, people who have high stakes types of roles. The first modality is actually listening to specific music. Now we think about music from a perspective of, it's going to fire us up, it's going to be fun. We all know that music brings certain feelings and emotions and can bring up memories. But what we don't think about is that, and it's just because it's not as commonly known, is that certain frequencies, and again, I'm not going to get into music music theory, although I will go there if you want me to. But certain frequencies have been proven scientifically to calm the neuroreceptors, to calm the brain.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things that I actually coach people to do is to begin listening to 528 hertz. Now there is a pure tone 528 hertz, which would just sound like a beep, which is not what I'm talking about. But you can go out on any of the music streaming services that are out there and just look up. They have beautiful music that is set to that frequency. It's sometimes called DNA healing because we actually have proven that it heals DNA. Sometimes it's called relaxing. Sometimes it's called sleep. Sometimes it's called restoration. I don't care what they title it. Just look for 528 hertz. And just have that on in the background while you're getting dressed in the morning. Have it on while you're driving home. During the day, if you've got a few minutes, perhaps between meetings, just put it on. You stick your headset on a couple of minutes without having to focus on it. That particular frequency is going to calm the mind down. And so the brain's going to stop firing. And what that means is we're going to be able to think with clarity. Our creativity comes back, our ability to be calm. And again, calm in the business place. I'm not talking about meditation, calm as if you've been, in your yoga class. I'm talking about just freeing the mind up so that you can think clearly and be more effective. The other side of that, the biological side of that, is that it does slow the brain down in terms of firing certain chemicals like cortisol and insulin, and those things create other issues, medical issues. Mm-hmm. So again, without getting too deep into that side of things, by calming the mind down, just by using 528 hertz a couple of times, integrate it throughout the day, that actually is one technique that I give to all my professionals, quite frankly, and it works every time like a dream.
Yeah. No, I was gonna build off of that, in that ironically this morning I was playing on Spotify healing frequencies. 528 hertz was a part of them. It seems like every 100 up or down has like a different kind of focus. And I think I was listening to 7 something hertz. You might be able to help me on that. And I think it was around intuition and problem solving, which was helpful in terms of what was on my plate. So yeah, I think that's it's such an easy way of kind of going about your day, going to YouTube and streaming, one of these healing frequencies or Spotify or wherever you consume music these days. And it's super accessible. And I know personally for myself, I do notice more of a sense of calm or focus. And I think that's such a great strategy to share as a starting place for folks thinking about, okay, I'm in the workplace, I'm a little stressed out. What can I do a little bit differently? It's pretty passive, once you look up the music and you put it on, and you can just notice those changes over time, maybe journaling or however you kind of self-reflect. Of the healing modalities that you provide, do you or have you considered taking these modalities to corporate clients outside of the one-on-one engagements that you do, just to encourage them to build in these self-care activities into the workplace?
Yeah, actually, I offer mindfulness workshops where I go in and actually teach these modalities to executives and other leaders so that they can integrate these practices for themselves and also for the people that work for them, the people in their teams. And it's a lot of fun because we play with these things, and I love working with skeptics. So we do get in a little bit into the science of things, because this can feel very, I'm going to use the term woo-woo, right? It can feel very, oh, let's go hug a tree and wear Birkenstocks and eat granola. Nothing wrong with all of those things. I wear Birkenstocks and eat granola myself.
Yes.
Right. But the science behind this is profound. So in the workshop, we'll actually talk about the biology that's taking place. And then we'll talk about up to 4 different strategies that can be integrated throughout the day. So breath work, healing frequencies are 2 great examples. And I have them practice, and we have fun because, it can be uncomfortable, and it can be very new, brave new world for some folks. Mm-hmm. And so, but in that practice, by the time we walk out of there, it takes hold, it takes root. And all they need to do, the participants, all they need to do is walk out of there with just one idea that they're going to commit to. And then I follow up about a month later to see how they're doing, and if there's any adjustment that they need to make. Mm-hmm. I help them through that adjustment. So, and that's incredibly rewarding. Nothing makes me happier than when I have those workshops, and the next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call, from one of the leaders saying, I've taught my entire team how to breathe, and we start staff meetings with taking 3 breaths, and then we talk about whatever we need to talk about. But by taking those few breaths, the entire team is shifting, mm-hmm. And they're actually more efficient and effective and happier. And as a result, mm-hmm. That just makes me incredibly happy.
Yeah. So talk with me a little bit more on the skeptics, because I'm sure that there are folks participating right now who are like, yes, we need to bring you into our workplace. We need this. We need to kind of shift our culture to be one where we are prioritizing our health so that we can keep showing up and doing our genius in the workplace. Yet kind of thinking about certain leaders who would basically scoff at the idea of engaging in any of these practices, which, as you said, may be written off as woo-woo or something that may feel like there isn't a return on investment. Obviously there is, but what might be like a few kind of talking points for those folks that they could share with their leadership of why this is good for folks in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, what I do in the workshops is share the data. Mm-hmm. So there have been studies conducted from Harvard Clinic, from Center for Creative Leadership, so both medical organizations as well as corporate, mind trusts, all of them give the same results.
Mm-hmm.
That not only, yes, this feels good. I'm not going to deny it, right? Stopping in the middle of the day to take a breath and listen to 528 hertz feels really good. But when I start to put those studies, and that's what I would encourage people to do, right? Just go out and look at Harvard research, for example, on the benefits of mindfulness, because that's how this is categorized in corporate. It's categorized as mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go out and do any research, just do an internet search and do Harvard mindfulness studies, they'll come up. And those studies are profound. When we talk about return on investment, and we talk about gaining efficiency, gaining product, gaining value from our team, it's there. So we have higher level of retention, we have a lower rate of burnout, we have a higher productivity, we have higher efficiency, all because of simple techniques of mindfulness, which is what we're talking about.
Right.
So that's really the business case right there. So if we run these workshops, and the workshops are only, again, depending on the size of the group, maybe 90 minutes, an hour to 2 hours, again, depending on the size of the group. So I'm averaging out to be 90 minutes. But in that 90 minutes, we learn these simple techniques that we can carry forward. And the ROI is in the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the retention of the employees on the team, as well as the leaders.
Right. Absolutely. So talk with me a little bit more about the impact mindfulness strategies, self-care strategies more broadly have had on the professionals that you've interfaced with in your own practice, and maybe a specific story or two that might demonstrate, I work with this particular client. These were some of the symptoms that they had coming in. As it related to the workplace, and kind of over time, here's some of the changes that I've witnessed.
Yeah.
I think that could be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share someone that's fairly recent. An individual reached out to me, found my website and reached out, very skeptical of what I do, but was feeling desperate. Yeah. They had, for years, suffered from headaches, insomnia, anxiety, and unexplained weight gain. He had been to many doctors and therapists, and everyone was treating him for something, but nothing was working. So he honestly came to me in desperation. I was like, this is my last effort. Right? I don't know what else to do, but I don't have quality of life at all.
Yeah.
And so we started out with one-on-one sessions that were, we started out once per week. And each week he had an assignment, if you will, of homework. And the assignment would be something very, very specific, such as you will listen to 528 hertz 3 times a day. And I prescribe specifically when in the day to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And he would roll his eyes. Absolutely. But he was
Did he do it?
He did it. I would text him to make sure he was doing it. Right. So we had all kinds of
good accountability. Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
By the end of the first week, he was noticing his anxiety levels were coming down, and he was asking me for more. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we started to integrate then some breath work and some other techniques. Within a month, he was sleeping through the night, which he hadn't done in years. His back pain and neck pain were gone. And his anxiety levels were reducing dramatically. It took overall about 12 sessions to have full breakthrough. And now he's in what I consider a maintenance cycle, where we just check in periodically. That's one example of one individual. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that that's a pretty typical scenario. Now, sometimes the breakthroughs take a little longer. It takes usually at least 4 sessions to have, breakthrough to begin, and about 10 for us to really hit transformation. Mm-hmm. Only because we're having to undo a lot of, I'm going to call them energy blocks, right? Just a lot of tension that's built up in the physical body as well as the emotional body. And we have to break through that. But as we're breaking through each layer with these techniques, things just improve and we just get more and more and more momentum. For me, the ideal client is someone who has those breakthroughs and, they come in once in a while for a tune-up, but they have all the tools they need. I'm an educator at heart. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, I want everyone to get to a point where they can integrate these practices for themselves mm-hmm. and not be dependent on anyone, including me. Yeah. And so that one example, I can repeat many, many times. It's pretty typical.
Yeah. And I want to build off of that because I want folks that are tuning into this session really to walk away with some activities that they could do right now, and I think, what I'm hearing from the example that you shared, one of the key roles that you're playing is building in that accountability. You're kind of that voice, inside of all of our heads of like, we could be doing this right now and this could help, but it's the discipline, right? It's kind of building in that discipline. So, so I guess you've mentioned a few things, definitely on breath and on the frequencies. So maybe if you could share maybe 3 other actions that folks right now could engage in that could just help them feel a little more relaxed in the workplace, feel like what they're doing is good enough right now, and that just so that they can feel refreshed and not fatigued, not burnt out from doing work that frankly is pretty challenging. So maybe a few other actions, not to give away all of your secret sauce, but at least to get some of us started on taking better care of ourselves.
Yeah. So in addition to the breath work and to the frequencies, one of the great techniques, again, these are all very simple. Mm-hmm. One is to go outside a couple of times a day and just stand outside. You can go for a walk. Now I live in the desert, so it's 112 degrees outside right now. And so going outside when it's that hot, or if you're in a cold climate when it's really cold, might not feel like a great idea. Right. However, again, without getting into all the details, right, the healing power of the sun and just connecting with being outdoors, breathing in fresh air, 5 to 10 minutes a day will do wonders. So I'm not suggesting, again, if it's 115 that you go out in the middle of the day, sure. But stepping outside early in the morning or in the evening, twice a day, right, to just hang out there and have a nice glass of water. And, again, the point is don't be on your phone. Put the phone down.
Yes.
Leave it in the house.
Yes.
And just spend 5 to 10 minutes sipping a glass of water, a glass of tea, whatever you enjoy, non-alcoholic, right? And just be out there. That's one very, very simple technique. You can also do it during the day if it's not too hot or too cold. So ideally 3 times a day, but again, weather might not permit 3. So that's one technique. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The second technique is actually in how we approach our work. So we have a tendency in approaching our work of, I don't know about you, but I was raised by a parent who said, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. And so, and again, corporate world, we're at that pace and it feels like if we take a pause during the day, we're not working. Mm-hmm. But actually the brain science behind it is the brain can actually only function efficiently in sprints, in short blocks of time. Mm-hmm. And we need a little mental break. So if you're in a position where your head's down, pounding out work, to think about a sprint in about 30-minute to 45-minute intervals, and then just take 2 or 3 minutes and do something like head outside or put on the music, right? And just sit for a minute or go for a walk Now, if you're, again, I know in corporate life, because I've had this happen to me, right? You go for a little walk, maybe you walk down to the restroom to give yourself a little break, and people are following you down to the restroom, even into the restroom,
Yes.
right? So it is about having that sacred space of quiet.
Yes.
And again, no phone, right? But but if you think in sprints, and again, the discipline, that means set a timer. Set a timer on your phone. You're going to work for 40 minutes. And then you're going to have the discipline when that timer goes off, no matter where you are. Okay, finish your sentence or whatever if you're writing, but then walk away. And it is so mentally difficult to do that because, again, time to lean, time to clean, right?
Yeah.
I can't afford to stop. But recognize that's going against how the brain functions.
Yeah.
And so if you honor how your brain functions and you stop in that 45 minutes, take a little walk, not even 5 minutes out.
Yeah.
You'll completely refresh. You'll actually get more done.
Right.
And the work you do will be better.
Yeah.
As a result of that break. So I think of those as sprints, right? So work in a sprint, pause, sprint again.
Yes. And so those are two really, really good ones. So kind of taking a step or taking the time to kind of go outside and just kind of recharge. You had also mentioned kind of this time blocking. I feel like there's a specific name to it. So in the supplemental information, I'll do a little digging, unless it comes to mind to you, Di. But and I've heard different techniques around experimenting with what that sweet spot is for you. Some people can be laser-like focused for 45 minutes. Other folks, it's 30 minutes. So maybe somewhere in there is like your time, and then just kind of really building in that discipline again of just kind of, even if it's, you're going to pause on writing the thing, you're at your desk because you don't want to get bombarded with people trying to get your attention when you go down the hall. So maybe it's, I don't know, maybe checking email or doing something other than kind of the big kind of activity that's consuming a lot of your brain energy. So I think that's super helpful. I wanted to touch on this piece on the phone because I do think that it plays into our self-care strategies. Do you have any general guidance that you give to your own clients around phone hygiene? Or I guess and that's an extension of kind of being connected online. So maybe it's more like internet hygiene, but this idea that we're constantly connected and, even so much that the first thing that we look at in the morning as opposed to our partner or our pets or whatever is like the phone. And then the last thing that we look at night is the phone. So any guidance for us to help us with better hygiene?
It's so incredibly unpopular what I'm about to say.
Go for it.
But, and again, I don't say it lightly, but having that same discipline, for example, if you're working in that cycle, when you find your sweet spot, say it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and then you're going to take that pause. If that pause is to go on the phone, even if you're playing a game, your brain actually hasn't gotten the break that it needs.
That's a great point. Yes.
So that discipline, like I say, if your choice is to go for a walk, one of the ways, this is a neat trick, and I've coached this for years and I've done this for years. Put your headphones on, even if you're not listening to music. Stick your phone in your pocket, have it in your hand, and walk. It psychs everyone out that you're listening to something. Yes. They won't bother you.
Yeah, it's true.
So it works. It definitely works.
Yeah.
As far as screen time is concerned, the downside of the 24/7 society and the fact that we can have access to everything right in the palm of our hand all day long, it's a curse and a blessing, right? So you do have to put the phone down, right? And again, it's highly unpopular, but your phone actually should never be next to your bed. It can be in the bedroom, but not at it should be further than hand's distance. So if that means it's on a bureau instead of on the nightstand, that way if there's an emergency or a phone call that comes through, you get it. But to your point, it isn't the first thing you pick up because you at least have to walk across the room.
Yes. Yep.
And it's the same when I say things like take a pause during the day. If you're using your phone to listen to the music, great. But if you're looking at the screen, you're actually defeating the purpose of giving your brain the quiet break that it needs.
Yes.
So the phone can be in your hand or in your pocket if you're listening to the music. Ideally, you're leaving it on your desk.
Yep.
While you take that short walk around the building or that short walk outside.
Yeah.
So it is about leaving the phone behind a few times a day and never sleep with it next to your bed. And I know that that's difficult.
Yes.
I don't say it lightly, but again, when we think about the impact on our vision as well as our brain, it's all bad.
Yeah. I mean, it's huge. And, you know, these are things that I don't think that we can hear too often. I know for myself, that's something that I struggle with, where it's so convenient to have the phone there just in case, right? Even if I'm not using it. So that's my own homework after today's conversation. You know, just this two more questions for you. This second to last one is more, you know, giving you the opportunity, keeping in mind who our participants are for this summit. You know, what's one thing about self-care strategies that we haven't yet covered, but from your opinion, it might be helpful for our audience to know, especially if it's something that you think that they don't already know?
That's such a good question. I think it isn't selfish to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
It's selfless to take care of yourself.
We
tend to think about self-care as a selfish thing. And it isn't. You know, it's kind of like when we're on an airplane and we're told put your own oxygen mask on first before you try to help someone else. That's what we're talking about. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah, I was thinking if there was a graphic to describe this day, that would be the graphic, right? But I think that, you know, that quote in and of itself is, you know, it gets to the point of we have to prioritize ourselves, right? And I think it goes back to your personal story where, you know, at a moment where it felt like things were falling apart, losing people that you love so much in your life, kind of looking back at what is important at this transformational moment, what is important, and it allowed you to reassess, and you were at the top of that list, you know, taking care of your health, your healing, your well-being. And I think that that's such a powerful message, a reminder for us in doing this really important, meaningful work. We still have to prioritize ourselves. And I don't think we can hear that enough. So I really, really appreciate you kind of walking through and sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your own stories, and being vulnerable enough to share those with us. Really appreciate that. I'm sure many people are moved by what you've shared today. So I want to give you the opportunity to let the audience know that, you know, the best place to find you and to learn more about your work.
Yeah, the best place to find me is my website. It's tigerlilyhealing.com, all one word, Tiger Lily Healing. And from there, you can read more about my story. I have blogs out there, more information about the work that I do. And through there, you can contact me directly, either via email or phone. And I think that's probably the best place to go.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate your time, Di. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and to learn about your work. It's something I'm very, very interested in as it relates to this field. And so the more that we can share on how we can all continue to show up and be our best selves and do this work and model that self-care for other folks, I think that the more successful we'll be at moving towards that grand vision of building healthier workplaces. So I thank everyone.
Thank you.
For everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, if you want more time with these talks, if you'd like additional resources for doing this work in your organizations, and if you'd like to join our community calls after the summit, you can check out our options for getting extended access to all of the sessions and other helpful goodies using the link below. Every purchase also helps me pay the speakers for their generosity, wisdom, and labor in helping us grow the belonging movement. Thank you, and thanks again to today's featured belonging champion.